What's the Sharon Angle turnout infrastructure? If the Republican Party isn't all that here, what is she relying on for turning out votes?
Karl Rove. American Crossroads announced a few weeks ago that they were going to dump a bunch of money into Nevada to help them with Get Out the Vote. And so they have poured some money, my understanding is, into the Nevada Republican Party, which essentially is a shell corporation. There's nothing there. And that they're then using that to mail to people, negative read mailers, and probably for phone banking. And so how much they've actually come through, we don't know on the reports yet.
Can you really fly in and get out the vote infrastructure? Doesn't it have to be based here? Doesn't it have to be organic?
I think not only does it have to be organic to be effective, but it can't be done in just a few weeks. Reid has taken a couple of years and millions of dollars to erect the infrastructure that he has now. But listen, in a race that could be close, Rachel, every little bit they do could help. And so it certainly can't hurt that they're doing it, but that they waited way too long. And the fact that the Republican Party in the state's been a joke for a long time is one of those things that could end up hurting Angle.
One of the old things everybody keeps saying about elections that doesn't really apply anymore, but we all keep saying it anyway, is that things always can break in the last few days of a race, and those late-breaking things really could turn elections one way or the other. You can have the greatest get-out-the-vote infrastructure in political history, but your campaign, they say, can be overtaken by some last-minute gaffe, some outside event that fundamentally changes the race, maybe even the weather on Election Day. We always say that. That is part of the way we understand politics in this country, but it is becoming less and less true in more and more states with each passing year, and that's because we're moving toward a system where people don't vote on Election Day anymore. People vote on any number of days leading up to Election Day, not just because of absentee voting, but because of early voting. And in Nevada, for example, that is a big deal. Nevada is home to the most high-profile, most closely watched race out of all the races around the country this year. Harry Reid versus Sharon Angle for Senate. As John Ralston, you saw there, explained on my trip to Vegas a few days ago, Harry Reid has as finely tuned to get out the vote machine as you can get. And Sharon Angle has Karl Rove. But by the time polls open on Tuesday morning, 65% of people who are going to vote in that election will have already voted. 65%. Thanks to early voting. Now, that means two things. Number one, it means that late-breaking news in that race can't really affect the final result as much as it used to, as much as it could before people early voted in such big numbers. Secondly, it means that we are able to get a sense of how the race is going based on who's already voted, who's already banked their votes. Early voting in Nevada ended on Friday night. The total number of early votes cast, just under 380,000. Among those voting, there were actually more registered Democrats than registered Republican. 42.9% of early voters were registered Democrats compared to 41.1% registered Republicans. Now, that does not mean that all of those people voted Democrat who are registered Democrat or voted Republican who are registered Republican, but broadly speaking, people do tend to vote with their party registration. Extrapolate at will. Today in the Las Vegas Sun, the same John Ralston who showed us around Vegas to give us the lay of the land there a couple days ago had a bombshell column that was essentially his prediction for how this race is going to turn out. John Ralston joins us now live from Nevada. John, it's good to see you again. Thanks again for all your hospitality last week.
Hi, Rachel. Good to be with you.
So the latest polls in this race do show Sharon Angle ahead slightly, but you wrote today that you think Harry Reid's going to win.
Can I take a page out of Sharon Angle's book and decline to answer any questions until after the election?
Do you want us to get into an airport so you can have that excuse?
That's exactly right. Yeah, going on a little moving walkway. Stay away from me. Anyhow, listen, I don't believe most of those public polls, Rachel, and I never have. I think it's been the worst year for public polls ever. The samples have been way off. And listen, I've been privy to a lot of private data, both Republican polling and Democratic polling, that indicates that Harry Reid is doing better than those polls show. So I trust that data. I trust that he is the most resilient guy in the history of Nevada politics who finds a way to win. And that turnout machine that you mentioned did manage to hold off whatever Republican wave there was going to be through about 2/3 of the votes being cast. So putting that all together, I went out on that limb.
Well, tell me what's going on with those early votes. As we said, that we've got about a 2-point lead of Democratic registered early voters versus Republican registered early voters. How does that translate into the final result? What does that tell you about I guess in terms of comparing that to the expectations of the campaigns?
Yeah, I don't want to give a blizzard of numbers, but let me just be clear on this. The Democrats, as you point out, have about a 2% lead in the early vote. They actually have a 5% or so registration lead statewide. So the Republicans have about a 3% lead relative to their turnout. But in the last midterm election, they had twice that when all was said and done. They had 6% in this state. And even 2 years ago, in the huge Democratic wave election here, the Republicans still had a 3% edge relative to their turnout. But the Democrats have way more voters in this state. They have 60,000 more voters, which is why they think they can hold off the wave. The key is what's going to happen Tuesday, and even more so what you mentioned earlier. Is it going to have that big an impact if it's not going to be a significant portion of the vote, only a third of the vote? When we see those early voting and absentee numbers come up, Rachel, on Tuesday night between 7 and 8 o'clock here, we are going to have a very, very good idea of who's going to win this race.
So when you see those early voting numbers come up, the poll, obviously we won't have those until the polls close. The polls will close. We'll get those numbers relatively soon. What sort of a spread are you going to be looking for in terms of forecasting how Harry Reid and Sharon Engel have done for the night?
Harry Reid better be ahead when those first early voting numbers come up, because they have really touted how well they've done in early voting, and they expect the Republicans to do pretty well on Election Day. Now, that's based on history. They typically have outperformed the Democrats on Election Day. Again, this is a strange year. Did they spend all their enthusiasm early in early voting when they were doing well? We don't know the answer to that. But if Harry Reid is not ahead, and Rachel has a significant lead here in Clark County, probably close to double digits, if he has much less than a 10% lead here in Clark County, if it's 6%, we are going to have a very long night.
John Ralston, columnist for the Las Vegas Sun, the host of Face to Face with John Ralston, and an excellent tour guide. John, thanks very much for your time tonight.
You're welcome. Good to see you.